What is up, everyone? It is Monday, and this is the Monday Win by Noon webinar, and I am your host, Todd Bookspan. I think most of you know me by now, but I'm the founder of Win by Noon and super excited to have you all here. Oh, and look at that. I got none other than Deborah Byrd from PlugAndPlaySM joining me. What's up, Deborah?
You always struggle with that name, Plug and Play SM. Do you
Because I
think
want to
of
say
SM?
SM Plug and Play. I don't know why. Like it's just the way it rolls off my tongue. I don't know what it is, but
I always see your wheels going. You're like thinking about it.
I know that's a little bit crazy, but that is all right. That is all right. I'm super excited to have you join me. So
Yeah.
it's always fun whenever Deborah gets here, which means that we will talk about what I wanted to talk about, plus so much more, because Deborah's going to have way more exciting things for us to chat about as well. So that is always exciting. You guys probably don't know, but see, Deborah has a lifetime pass to be my co-host on this, and some days I know she's coming, and other days, like today, she surprises me with her presence, which just makes me smile all over.
That's my goal in life, is to just pop in and surprise you, Todd.
That's pretty good. That is pretty good. So what do you want to say to the audience before I start talking about, I don't even know you saw my headline I was going to talk about today.
Yes, the 3 things to declutter your mind. So I was looking at my Win by Noon quote, weekly quote. It's a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I thought, why do some of my goals or some of my plans or intentions don't get done? And it is the noise and the clutter, which I have a very noisy mind. It's hard for me to turn it off sometimes because I have all these ideas, and then the execution is a struggle. So I'm ready to be coached up by you, Todd.
I appreciate that. So it's funny because that's my biggest challenge, is there's always just so much going on in my brain. And it was interesting because I was watching, there's a guy I know, his name's Ari Meisel, and he wrote a book called Less Doing. And I met Ari in Genius Network. So I was a member of an entrepreneur group for a couple of years. It's led by probably one of the most connected people that's out there. His name is Joe Polish. And in this group, I met Ari, and Ari now has totally gotten out of all the things that he did. But I'll tell you what he was doing when I met him. When I met him, he had this company called Less Doing. He wrote a book called Less Doing. And basically what they did was he would consult with you on how to create shortcuts in your life. And he's just a really interesting guy. And he came up with different ways to make things happen quicker. And then so much so that he got it down to where he was working about 20 minutes a day. And then so I saw this podcast with him. Some of you know Steve Sims, who's a friend of mine, who's done a lot in the mortgage space. And so Steve knows Ari as well. In fact, it was Steve who told me, Todd, stop being a fool. And I was asking him questions, just hire Ari and have him help you do these things. And ironically, since then, Ari's actually gotten out of doing what he was doing. He closed down his company because he decided to just focus on what he loved, which he became a volunteer EMT, like in his little town he lived in, like helping people. And so he does that. And then he has a handful of private coaching clients, and he just literally coaches them on Voxer. I don't know if you guys know what Voxer is, but it's it's kind of like, think about it like Slack, but instead of being a typed message, it's a video, or like a voice memo. So he basically, a client will ask him their question, hey, Ari, what's the secret sauce to, solving world peace? And then they leave him that. And then whenever he has his allotted time for it, he'll reply back via audio to all of his coaching clients. So it's a really interesting model. He charges a lot of money. His 1 day fee is $40,000 if you want him to come and try to fix your problems. And so I just listened to a podcast where this guy called him the world's most productive man alive. And he goes and spends and interviews Ari. In fact, I will put a link to the podcast in so that you guys can all listen to it. But it was funny because Ari gave 2 ideas that I took away and said, okay, these are things I'm going to talk about in the community. One of them, ironically, just happens to line up with what I'm doing in my group coaching program today for their homework. So those of you who are on here who are part of the group coaching program, it's a spoiler because I'm not going to tell you what that one is, because that's not what's going to unclutter your mind. But the other thing he said is that you always have to have something with you to capture ideas. So that was sort of idea number 1. And then I thought, okay, well, I can't do a 30-minute conversation on just one idea. So I'm gonna have to come up with a couple of other ideas. But that's really the biggest one, is to always have something with you to write down your ideas. And I think that that's why, drum roll, please. The front page of the Win by Noon planner, as well as the business planning tool, has what's called an idea list, right? So you always have it. So for me, I write down ideas in my planner on the day of the planner. So like when I'm on a call with Deborah on a mortgage coach call, or I'm talking to her, or she sends me a text and tells me to do something like a weekly thing. Look at that. And so it's where do you keep those ideas to make sure that you always retain them? And so there's a guy named David Allen. He wrote a book called Getting Things Done. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's 20 years old, but it's still like one of the best things about shortcutting stuff. And he calls it like mind like water. Apparently he's like into karate. Waha. And you missed that, Deb. You were looking down. Let me show that again. Waha. I did my karate move. And so he says it's mind like water. And so you have to have some type of device to capture your ideas. And I do it in two ways. Number one is I do it in my planner. And then I also do capture a lot of stuff in Evernote. So for me, that's the other place where I capture ideas, but I use Evernote more for things like the podcast. So like when I watch the podcast, so I'm going into Evernote right now, I'm going to copy the video link and I'll put it in the chat for all of you. And if you're watching some video, I'll put it down below. But ultimately I use it so that way I can always go back and find things. So it's funny, when I had my radio show for 5 years, I can go in and in Evernote, I've got a tag that said RERN, which stood for Real Estate Radio Network. And it's all the different real estate agents that I interviewed over the years for the show. And I can go back and I can read all my notes from when I interviewed them prior to the show. And some of them I'm like, I don't even know who that person is. That's because they weren't that interesting and I didn't actually put them on the show. So that's
so much more effective, because I would use, and I still do this, I probably shouldn't, now that you've just given that tip, is I would use my notes section in my phone. But what happens is it gets so long and there's not an easy way to then search,
Yeah. Well, I think this is that I like the Notes app too. I do use it a little bit. I use Notes more for things that I'm going to use that I know I'm going to do and then delete. So like if I'm walking down the street and I'm like, I've only got my phone with me, I'll text I'll put something in Notes, and then I look at my notes when I get home. I put it in my planner if it's an action to do, and then I get it done, and then I delete the note. And then I also use Notes with my family, because my family doesn't like Evernote or doesn't all have Evernote, and then I can do the shared notes on the latest update on Notes on my iPhone. But I tend to find that for me, it's amazing how often I would have the world's greatest idea and then I would forget it, like poof, it's gone. And then I wouldn't have it. So, the number one thing is just to think about what is your system for keeping these ideas. And there's lots of great things out there for it. But I tend to find that, there's no perfect thing for everybody. But when I built out Win by Noon, I left the idea list in there because for me, that's been kind of tried and true. And then the other piece I would say about it is that, so every quarter, I write it in there with my hands and it makes me think about it, right? The problem is when you put it onto something electronic, you don't go back and look at it frequently enough. And so you forget it's there. And so number one is I can flip to it and look at it. Number two is that quarter by quarter, I can go back through and I can move it forward. So if it was one that is still important, it gets moved forward. If it's one that is not important anymore, guess what? I don't move it forward. I just delete it. So it also gives me the opportunity to prune the list. I like that word, pruning. My buddy, Coach Michael Regan, uses pruning all the time, and he prunes it. And so I think that is another way for me to do it. And then it reprioritizes it too, because that's what becomes the projects that I work on. And it's always frustrating to me. Maybe you guys have been there. I joke about my drawer that's down here that's full of, ideas that are 80% done. And, there's millions of dollars of things that I haven't done that was so close that were good enough to launch, right? Done is better than perfect. And so I think that would be my coaching to all of you, is just figure out what that tool is for you. Obviously, it doesn't have to be Win by Noon. It could just be the front of a planner. But I tend to find that if it's not something that you're going to carry around, it's not going to get looked at if you don't review it and move it forward. So that's why, I use the planner for that piece of it. I love it. Larry says that he sometimes sends himself a voice text. I mean, I think that's great, right? I mean, then the question is that if I do that, then I have to make sure I go there and get it off of there and put it somewhere else to to make sure that I take action. I always laugh because I can go in, I got two different phones and I text myself between the phones. And so I laugh when I look at the two different phones and see, I sent myself something that I wanted myself to look at and I never looked at. And so those are those gaps. Any thoughts on that, Deborah?
Well, it makes me wonder with your idea with the TCA and CMA Genius challenge that you created. I mean, you heard that you took action pretty quickly after that, right?
That was that was unusual for me, right? Like that's not my normal MO to take immediate action, but I knew that was
like that something you put in Evernote, and was that, I mean, because you didn't even wait a quarter.
That one it went in my planner. Cause again, I always have you all know it. I'm a nerd, right? My planner is always by my side, right? Look at my planner is very colorful today. It's got lots of green in it.
Oh.
And so my planner is always here and I take notes on that. You know, it was my coaching group that I have, that I've had for a couple of years. And I wrote it down and then I immediately sent an email to Adam and asked him to take action on it and draw it up. So that one was there was no lag there. And then it was already going and it didn't need to get on any list.
But the execution of then how you delivered it, I mean, you had an idea, you had to translate that idea to Adam. I'm assuming Adam nailed it kind of the first time with what you wanted with the calendar, with the front and back.
He did. I can't remember exactly how I did. I probably sent him a voice memo on it and then I was rambling. So as you guys know, I'm pretty good at rambling. And so I probably just rambled to him what it should look like and told him what I wanted. And we only did a couple of, what do you call it? Renditions? Is that the right word? Whatever you call it. We did a couple versions of it. And I think, he did one, I gave him some pointers and then I sent it to Dave for Dave's feedback. Cause I told him I had like the world's greatest idea. It took Adam like a week to get to it. And, I was just super excited about that.
But the execution of then even having it available to buy online, and then you could have bulk orders and, shipping. I mean, there was a lot of little pieces to that project beyond just the idea that y'all executed in a pretty timely, well done way.
Yeah. I mean, it was less than 30 days. It might have only been a few weeks. And so, yeah, I think with that one, because it was so crystal clear what it was going to be and it wasn't ridiculously complex, right? I think that's oftentimes where, complexity is the enemy of profitability is what my friend Michael Regan would say. And, I think that's where I've always hurt myself the most is that I always try to make things harder than they have to be. And it's the whole idea of that I'm always shooting for perfection. And it was good enough to go to market. We've asked for feedback on it. We haven't gotten a whole lot of, hey, you should have done this instead.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, and, there's only a few steps, right? Design it, get it approved by Dave, since we were using Mortgage Coach and, he's Mr. Mortgage Coach, had to do that. And then, get it to the printer and get it printed. And that was, one of those things where, certainly exceeded our expectations. We had to, we got what I think we ordered 1,000 of them to start and we sold out of them pretty quick just because we had so many people. Jeremy Forcier, Wall Schultz, a bunch of people buy 100 plus. And, once you sell that many to one person, all of a sudden other people think they should buy that many too.
Yeah.
Which was pretty awesome.
So I think that's what you just said is the most critical part is, at least for me, but it can be things that are typically pretty simple. We just overthink it and make it way too complex, which is why we never get certain projects done, beyond just not managing ourselves with the time and putting it in our planner and breaking down the milestones, but then just overthinking and making it complex.
And I think that's a lot of it. And I'd like to say it's because we're also smart, right? I think this is a really smart group of people. And I think that we're all doing this from a place in our heart where we really want to provide the best we can provide for people and be the best person that we can be. And I think that's what can get in our way. And oftentimes it's, I'm just reminding myself, right? It's just a matter of one day at a time, get it done and you can always fix it later. And that's really when the best masterpieces happen.
I found out using the planner early on, what I was not great at was estimating my time. So I would create time blocks for my week, thinking I could get certain projects done, say like in an hour. And I was realizing how bad I was at predicting how long certain things would take me, which was probably the most glaring observation when I first started using the planner.
Well, so one of the things you always have to do is have white space. So let me talk about that with idea number two. So my idea number two is that um, you have to create you have to have a morning meeting with yourself. You have to create a daily plan to execute on. And you could do it the night before. I know some people that they spend the last few minutes of their work day planning their next day. And, of course, I say you have to plan your week first. So I did my weekly planning meeting last night while I was watching football. That was, I was, it was very exciting. I was doing a lot. I actually was watching, whatever, 1880 something, 1883, the Tombstone sequel with my wife. That was on the big TV. I had my phone set up here with with the game going, and I was doing my weekly planning meeting at the same time. I was totaling up my numbers from last week, doing my weekly review, and really
Now
setting
that sounds like
intention for the week.
multitasking, Todd.
Yeah, which is funny because that may or may not be part of idea number three.
Oh.
But it depended what was going on, right? Obviously, if I'm looking at my planner, I'm looking at it. It's, when you're watching football and watching regular TV, that's not really multitasking. You're just kind of waiting to see I wasn't invested in the game, so I didn't really watch except for the last 2 minutes when it got kind of crazy. But ultimately, to me, I think most people, the reason that their brain is so cluttered is that they get going at the office with no plan. We know my statistic is 94% of people start going to the office, no plan, 91% have inconsistent month over month business. And because of that, it is the reason that people their mind is all cluttered because they don't know what to do next. And so for me, because I'm really crystal clear on what I'm going to do when I get in and who that's targeted at, whether it's just me planning content. So when I get done with here, I've got my content block of on time, which will be 2.5 hours. And then I've got an hour to react. And then I'm going to get my back worked on so that I, stand up straight and don't have a sore back. And so I'm really crystal clear on what each of those blocks looks like because I've spent the time. And so you said that for you underestimated time. And I think one of the keys I learned there early on, and I probably learned it from Coach Bill Hart, was that you can't overplan your day. You have to make sure you've got enough white space in case what you're working on runs over. And so it's also just having that white space. So for me, it's that react time where, when I was doing, originally doing Win by Noon, I might get to the end of the day and not have that react time. I might not literally check my email from noon when I left the office to go meet and run around and do meetings, went home, unplugged, got up the next morning, jumped in because I already knew what my action plan was. These are my calls I'm making. And then I checked my email. So it could have been 24 hours till I checked my email. That's why I would say email is just not what I consider a priority. And that gives some loan officers heartburn when they think I didn't check my email for 24 hours. But that probably happened, once every couple of weeks. But ultimately, that's why now I've got time to react in at the end of the day, right? I've got a lot of time in there. But I think if you don't start with a plan, then you're more likely to be cluttered, right? So it's this whole idea. If you've got an idea list, you could also take that idea list and say it's an action plan list. So like I just was on the phone with someone and I said, great, let me work on that. I will get back to you tomorrow. So what did I do? I flipped the page in my planner and at the very right below, it's not on my, it's not here, but you can see it's what I got my virtual background. Sorry, I'm down a car. So I'm working at home, but it says Victoria, right? So I'm going to call Victoria tomorrow. So I won't forget, right? I've already asked someone else. I've already delegated that off to somebody else, that task. And that's my reminder to me to A, make sure I got it back to me. And then B, that I follow up with her. And oftentimes what I find is that we're not writing it somewhere. We're keeping it in our mind. Oh, I got to call her. We're assuming that the person we delegated it to is going to do it. And that's a mistake. Sometimes the delegated person is yourself. And if it's not written down, it's a mistake. So it's this whole idea of getting everything out of there and then making sure that you've got a plan for your day. Luis is asking me a question. I saw your question, Luis. I'll get to it. Just give me a sec.
I think what is so powerful with what you just said with making sure you then write it down is, to me, it's that whole like ending of the loop where what ends up happening is if I don't take the time to write it down and if I don't have that plan crystallized, then it's like having multiple tabs open in my head because I can't ever remove one because I'm constantly worried I'm missing something, where that trust hasn't been built, that if I worked my plan and used the planner to its fullest ability, then I wouldn't have those extra concerns of what did I not get done or what did I not write down, because it would just be habit at that point. And I think you then learn to trust yourself, where all those open tabs that drain your battery so quickly, could be relieved if we just stuck to the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we rely on our brain and we rely on technology a lot, and technology is great. It's works for me. I was playing around with some online to-do lists because my daughter really wants to use an online to-do list she's a grad student, and she's going to be a therapist. So she's got 10 therapy clients, and she's trying to find the perfect tool for that. So I was playing around, and for me, it was terrible because, again, I didn't want to be on my phone, because I go on my phone, guess what's on there? Text messages and Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. And so I realized that there was stuff I put on there that never got done versus just having it flat out in front of me. And, as a reminder, I try to take the remedial approach, because I feel like, although I think if I focused on the technological approach, I would be really good at it, but I feel like I would have more distractions than I would. And again, I'm all about trying to keep it simple.
That is so true. If I touch my phone, I literally had just done that. I went to call Sydney, and I had seen that I had a new notification. It was actually from Teams. And then because I have this in my device, it's like the crack cocaine, where I see, I've got messages that I haven't looked at yet on Facebook, or, like, look at this notification.
Yeah, that's it, right? Look at a TikTok too. Look at you, you're good.
So I used to get really obsessive with the red bubbles in general on my phone. Like, it was I didn't want any notifications, and I've clearly let go of that.
Well, and if I could find my phone, I don't even know where it is. It's back here. So on my phone, I've turned off all notifications. And so even my text messages have it, but I moved it off the bottom of the screen. So you can't see it. I'll turn it upside down, but I took text off the bottom. It just has calls, my calendar, and my camera, because my calendar is what I live by. And I moved it. Oh, my daughter's calling me. Sorry, honey. She lives in New York, and she calls me when she's walking from school to the subway. But my mail has no notifications on it. So I really just turned off notifications and everything. All my Facebook and all that stuff doesn't have notifications. Only the business Facebook does. So I go in there and reply to people who leave comments on our stuff.
That's good. That's really important, Todd.
It is. Yeah. I know. Thank you, says my social media coach.
The timeliness of responses and engaging to people matter.
Yeah. And then I also moved off my home screen. My home screen has on it notes, photos, music, podcasts, and meditation. So I moved my texts and my emails actually on the second screen on there, just to get it out of my way. Because again, I'm trying to eliminate distractions. And for me right now, I actually have an iPod that I use sometimes for meditation and my music and stuff in the morning. But it died, and I have to get a new one. So I'm using my phone. And again, I'm going to be too distracted. So if my texts and my email are on the front page of my phone where the other stuff is, I'll look at it in the morning, and I try not to look at it till after 7 o'clock. So real quick, from a color coding perspective, I don't really color code much, Luis. It's really just more, I did color code this because I was very excited about it. I made it, green was dial, because dial's making money. Blue was create, because that was the other color highlighter I had, not any other reason. And then I use red for react, because again, that's just time that's, to me, wasted time of reacting. So it's kind of like draining, right? So you've seen some people do they color code their time, yellow, green, red. Like green is my making money time, yellow is my time working on the things that are making money, and red's the stuff that doesn't make me any money. But I do also use it in here. So as I go through on my day, like here's my to-do list. So I had my to-do list, which is my top priority to-do list at the top. I only had 2 things on there today. And then I've got the people I committed to follow up with, and I highlight them as I get it done. And so I learned that I stole that from Win by Noon user Larry Lee. He just said, I highlight everything. So as I go through the day, I highlight the things I get done on there. Doesn't matter what color it is, but I highlight them. I used to cross them off, but highlighting looks cooler. And then at the end of the day, if something didn't get done, then I write it on the next day and I highlight it so it's off of that day. So it's not done, but it is highlighted and moved to the next day. The other thing that I do is that, like, if it's a call I have to make, I'll make a circle next to it. So even though it's got that little checkbox, I'll draw a round circle next to it that I made the call if I'm waiting for them to call me back. So that's my hint to myself that I've started that process. And then again, at the end of the day, it still may be there, and then I'll move it to the next day as another call. I mean, and hey, the person didn't call me back, which is just rude. Like, they should be calling me back, right?
Well, maybe they have a plan in their schedule and they're following their plan, and they're taking a day before they call
that could
back.
be that. You can justify that for them. That's fine. I appreciate that. All right. So my idea number 3, that was my drum roll, was Someone said, what did yellow mean? I don't, oh, yellow would mean something that it depends on what you do. Some people would say yellow is time preparing for the green things, right? So it's kind of working on your business. But it's typically something that's not a money-making activity, which to me, if you're a real estate agent or a loan officer, you calling clients and talking to clients, meeting with clients, meeting with referral partners. Red is anything where that's to me like chasing a pay stub or chasing a home inspection, right? Is red. It's not what you want to do. So it's kind of anything in between. That's really not money-making activity. And it's not, not total red ink that's draining your time.
That's what I found is I would, this is earlier on, some coaching programs that tell you to do a certain number of calls and have a certain number of meetings per week. What I didn't allow for was each meeting, say you have an hour block for that meeting, there's like research and development time that goes into every meeting. Maybe you're looking at that production, or like for me now in just my business, every discovery call I have, I'm having to go back and look at who does this person work for, what social media accounts are they already on, and what's their consistency of posting. And I try to do some of that research prior to have the most effective call. But that's what I didn't realize, that if you didn't have any of that white noise space and you just had back-to-back meetings, where's your research and development time to prepare, or even then put in your notes for the follow-up is what I didn't.
That's a great point. So for me, what I've done on my calendar is, so I run I've got an iPhone and I've got my work calendars in yellow, and that's what my Calendly link, my little online fancy calendar hooks to. And that's what my wife looks at to see what we're doing. And then in red is the Bookspan family calendar. And so the red calendar are the other things that are going on, and so that I can see what else it is that I've got to do. And so she'll make anything that is family that I need to be blocking my time for on the yellow on my work calendar as well. And what you have to do is have time. So like in my for the group coaching that I'm doing, right, it's an hour call, but I allow 30 minutes afterwards for Q&A. So since it's technically an hour call at Zoom only blocks an hour on my calendar, and then I block an hour afterwards, 30 minutes for the Q&A, and then I do 30 minutes for just my thoughts afterwards. Like, what were the questions that were asked? What do I want to make sure that's done? So that's why, like, right now I've already got a question that someone asked at the very end last time that's on my list for tomorrow. Ironically, it backs into my currently until daily savings time hits, and it backs into my coaching call with Jonathan Roach. So I got a hard stop right at 90 minutes, but then I blocked 30 minutes after my time with Jonathan, which I really already had time blocked after that, but I only have 15 minutes blocked. So that way I could make notes from my call with Jonathan, or what are my action plans from my coaching call? Because oftentimes what I find is, anytime, for those of you listening to this, when you get off of this call, hopefully you're going to find something that's actionable. And the question is, when are you going to do it? And so if you've got time, whenever I schedule time to do, anything where I think I'm going to learn something, I'm allowing time afterwards to get it done. So it kind of goes back to what you said about the TCA a day thing. I took action on it because I could, but there's just times where, if you're going from call to call to call, event to event to event, meeting to meeting to meeting, Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, whatever it is, you're just not going to execute on it. It's no different. I just finished reading a couple of books, and I highlighted those books, but I haven't really studied them. So I'm going to actually make time to go back, look at all my highlights, make my action notes, from doing that. And as nerdy as it sounds, you just have to make time for these things, or it just doesn't happen. And so that would be, I guess that's a better number 3 than my multitasking. Number 3 is to schedule time to take action on the things that you need to take action on. See, good thing you were here, Deborah. See, if not, but I'll still talk about multitasking. That'll be my bonus idea. So I'm just calling that schedule time to take action.
Okay.
And then research is what you said too, right? So you also have to, schedule time to research, and that's, it's just like anything else. I worked this morning. I had time blocked, and I worked on my PowerPoint for tomorrow for my coaching call, because I wanted to make sure that it was, I had some new ideas and some things I wanted to add into it. I've got time again, my on time this afternoon. I didn't call it create time. I mean, this is ideas. I'm executing on ideas. And so these are ideas that will come off my idea list, and then I'll make sure I execute on those. But ultimately in the end, I think that was my big takeaway to call. Make sure we schedule time. So thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because it then puts, again, I don't know, I think there's a book called The Open Loop, or maybe it's The Habit Loop. And if you don't close the end of the habit, or you don't something with when the mind is left open and you don't have that maybe due date of by when, it just keeps renting space in your head. And that's what, to me, when I want to get something done sooner than what I have, AKA the children's book that I'm working on for financial literacy that I'm still working on, Todd. I've had this idea for a while and I've started and stopped and started and stopped. And I need to really put those due dates and make them where I don't keep erasing and pushing it back.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the other part of it too, is you have different levels of energy at different times of the day. So if you listen to that thing of what Ari says, he says, most people have, he said 3 hours a day. I don't know if 3 hours a day is it, but everyone's got different time where you have more energy to do things. And, it tends to be more of a willpower thing because you lose willpower by the end of the day and you might make a worse decision by the end of the day if you're trying to do heavy lifting. But I do know a lot of people who think really well at the end of the day. I just don't. I can talk really well at the end of the day. There's a reason that I do my webinars at the later in the day, not in the morning, because I would rather take that time in the morning and be thinking and doing my thinking stuff than doing it in the afternoon. I can talk all day, right? It's super easy for me, right? I could do that. And so it's just kind of a, one of those interesting things, but you kind of said the word by when, right? That's a, famous coaching thing. I got really good at that when I'd say, okay, coach, like I want to do blank. And they go, okay, awesome. Well, when are we going to do that by? And so that's the other part of it. You have to force yourself to do it. And then you got to schedule the time to get it done. Just like my quote earlier that you mentioned at the start of this call.
Yeah,
I will tell you all a secret. So I use StreamYard for that. So last week I went StreamYard and I had this little stand up that did Instagram live on my cell phone. And for whatever reason, StreamYard it must have messed up because it didn't go to all my social stuff that way, but it did go out via Instagram. So the proof was I really did it because it was on Instagram, but the StreamYard one didn't work. And so today I did something I've never done. I pre-recorded my StreamYard live because it lets you do that. And so I think it might've gone out. I have to look when we're done, but I pre-recorded my video. And the worst part about pre-recording it is I recorded it twice because I messed up in the first 30 seconds of it. And so I don't like that. I'm never gonna do it again. I shouldn't say never. Most likely will not do it again. I'm gonna do it live because I want to be live. And then I don't care if I mess up and do that.
Was it in your Win by Noon mastermind group?
It would have run a Win by Noon mastermind group. It might go in 13 minutes. It was supposed to go at 1:45. Oh yeah, that's why it's not going to go for a few minutes. Yeah, I thought I did 12. I think it goes in 5 minutes. So you guys are gonna be like, so we got to get off here in 10 minutes. I got to get off here so that people think I'm live. I can't be in two places at once.
But see, you can be.
I can be. That's true.
Because most people don't watch the live until after you've recorded it. So I don't know if you noticed my live I did Friday in my Facebook group was StreamYard, pre-recorded.
Oh, nice. There you go. All right. Well, I did that. So, but then it's not on Instagram though. That's the only problem. So it's not on Instagram this time.
I almost sent you an Amazon link where they have, so anyone who's listening to this who may want to use StreamYard, they make a device holder where your iPhone can go right next to your webcam. And that way it can look, because at first my feedback for Todd was he was looking like this almost because you had your iPhone.
Yeah, last time I had my iPhone over here, so it's to the side. And then the other time it was above it. And so I was trying to look at both of them. And then I'm looking down here to read my quote because my memory's not good enough for that.
Well, they make a device now where it can hold like multiple phones and webcams if you wanted them closer.
Once I get my new office, I'm going to totally deck it out. I'm going to have one of those big, 50-inch wide monitors. And instead of using my laptop that I'm on, I'm going to actually have a Mac, mini that runs everything, or plug my laptop, or who knows, but I'll be higher tech, but I'm not this week.
Hey, you know what you're doing, and done is better than perfect. And I've had more discovery calls just the start of this year where they've actually started referencing Todd and Todd taking action and being more visible and doing the webinars and the lives. It's now encouraging and inspiring them that they can do it. So I appreciate you taking action, and regardless if your setup is high tech or not, it works and it's creating an impact and your message is getting out there.
Well, thank you. It's your accountability. It's the fact that you challenged me to it. Dave didn't even respond. I just said I took it upon myself because it's so much easier when someone else does that. So Rob Creed is asking if you would give the link to that tool on Amazon. So yes. I don't know if you can.
StreamYard. Oh, you mean for the Amazon thing?
For the Amazon thing. So my multitasking, I'm not going to talk too much about multitasking because really what you all know about multitasking is it's switching. I'm reading a book right now Here's my trick for listening to or reading books lately is that I don't like to listen to business books because I like to take notes and I have to go back and go back and go back. So what I'm actually been doing is I bought the audiobook of my books and then I'm reading the book and highlighting the book while the book is reading it to me. So it's taken me a really long time to read books, although I listen to them on double speed, and that's why I talk so fast. But I'm actually reading a book called A World Without Email, and it's super boring so far. But
sounds
it's
great. Sounds like an amazing world.
It's by Cal Newport. He wrote Deep Work as well, and he's like a educator, right? So it's just really like, I'm thinking he could write the book in 15 minutes, 15 pages, but it's got, he's going back to like the 1700s and research on when they first researched multitasking, and it's really just switching. Your brain just can't do that much at once. So you kind of made fun of me before for doing that. So I think it depends what you're doing when you're multitasking, right? Like, can you chew gum and rub your head at the same time, or rub your belly, or whatever that thing is? But, we all know that multitasking really is switching, and there are people who are better multitaskers than others. Like my wife is definitely a better multitasker than I am. But what I would say is do your best not to do that, right? If you're really trying to do your best work, you can't do that. You can't, like, I'm very focused when it comes to when I'm working on something. So like when I was working this morning on my PowerPoint, there was other things I could have done, right? I could have looked at what the stock market was doing because I knew it was going to be a bad day. I could have been listening to a podcast. There's other things I could have done, but I knew I had a fixed amount of time and I needed to give it all of my attention. And that's what I did. I wasn't flipping back and forth because I was getting emails. And, I mentioned before, notifications are off. So if you looked at the bottom of my laptop, which you guys can't see here, I mean, my mail doesn't have any red numbers. I know there's email, right? Like I'm confident that 99% of my life, I've got email that's unread. And I don't need a little number to tell me that. When it's time to read my email, I just go and I click on my email and I open it up and I look at it. And so I'm also very laser focused not to allow distractions. And I know that if it told me that there was a number there, I would be in trouble. So I've got iMessage there. There's always a message from somebody I know on iMessage. I've got, my work email, and same thing. It's all that stuff is turned off so that I don't get, FOMO from it. And I've just gotten comfortable with all of that. My youngest daughter has pretty severe OCD, and for therapy with OCD, it's really addressing your fears. And they tell her just sit with it. And so I just sit with it. I'm comfortable with the fact, although I hate having unread email. I hate having unreplied to text. Actually, I hate having unreplied to text. Email, again, it's a slow form of communication. So I don't think those are that important, but I still don't like having unread emails, not as much as unread text or unresponded to. And so you just have to be okay with the comfort level of knowing you have it and then ignoring it. Because obviously you've got all those red dots and all your social media. It's not driving you crazy, at least not right now. I don't think. Maybe it is, but
no, there's days where I wish, you go back and kind of when things slow down, even with COVID. I mean, we didn't have, I have 4 kids. We probably have about 12 practices a week, 10 games on the weekend. You have every teacher that then is notifying you of something. And so there's times that when I want to unplug, I'm like, I just want to throw this device out of a window and like not be accessible and not. So there's things that I love about being able to connect. Like I had shared with you that I was able to talk to my dad for the first time in 13 years because of Facebook Messenger that I haven't seen. He's in the Philippines. And so I love to be able to connect in that way. And it was through video, but there's also times where I feel like if I don't own this, it owns me and robs me of moments in my time. And even just this weekend, I was at my son's, he's 7, it was his basketball game. So it was somewhat painful to watch and stay focused. And I caught myself responding to a client that needed help with, something with social media. And I love helping with social media, that I caught myself not being present and had missed one of the baskets that he shot, he actually made. And I was like, dang it. I let this thing, rob me of my time because I made this my priority instead of my son who was playing what seemed like a boring game. So I remember I had someone ask me once with certain tasks that I had, because I too used to get really fixated and almost OCD with like my house being clean. I'm not a cook, but I'm a great cleaner. And like my pantry is super organized. My closet is all like color coded with tank tops to long sleeve, like efficiency, especially with having so many kids. But one time I was asked, if you would just look at things, and it could be fears or whatever, but what would be the worst thing that would happen if, say, you didn't get that done? Like, what's the worst? Imagine the worst thing. Could you overcome that worst thing? And when I started doing that, I was like, yeah, I mean, this is, and how would I do? This is what I would do. Even if it was letting somebody go or whatever, figuring that conversation. What's the worst that could happen? Am I going to die? Like, is the world going to end? Then why am I worrying about something and let it occupy so much space in my head and renting time for what? Like, there's nothing I can't recover from, So I had to get better at asking myself that one question when facing fears of, the FOMO, or maybe if I didn't get back to my email, like, what's the worst that could happen? I tell someone, oh, sorry, I don't work on the weekends. I'll get back to you on Monday. That would be completely appropriate.
Well, the perfect example is, right, it tells me someone who's got their business under control. So I don't know if you guys saw our interview with Dino. Look at that. I had 6 texts when I just looked at my text, so I could go to this text from Dino. So for those of you who watched it, Dino talked about the fact that, how basically his relationships he builds, really talked about, he didn't call it the reticular activator, but it's the part of your brain that, we all know. I've always heard it say, when you thought, hey, I want to buy this red car, and you've never seen a red version of whatever it is, I don't want a Tesla, but let's pretend I did a red Tesla. And all of a sudden you're like, I've never seen a red Tesla. And then 5 minutes later, you see red Teslas. And Dino said to me, to me and Deborah, he's like, well, when's the last time you saw a Pinto? And I'm like, I couldn't tell you. He's like, you're going to see one in the next 5 days. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then sure enough, I kid you not, I saw a Pinto and I took a picture of it.
Crazy.
But Dino's response was, sorry, but with this being outside of my working hours, I may not receive this text immediately and might be delayed in replying. Mm-hmm. So think about that. Like, for those of you in real estate or loans, your number one concern is that you're going to lose a lead. And that's a guy who's so happy in with his business that he can do that. And his clients will be okay with it because they're referred into him so well, because that's what he's built, is a referral-based business. And it was a pretty sweet.
He shared at Sales Mastery. This is the first year he has not taken a vacation in, like, I think it was over 10 years. And this summer was the first time he took 2 weeks. They were individual vacations, 1 week here, 1 week there, but he didn't even bring his laptop. And he said his new goal and mission was, how do I cut 2 hours of work off my day? And so he hired someone that literally just watches his emails. I mean, he doesn't touch his email. I mean, the way he protects his time, and to me, the fact that he was able to help over 300 families last year, and he had every single buyer consultation call himself. He's learned to leverage out certain tasks where he's doing more with less time. So he said he has now, for once, been able to have vacation, and it was stress-free. He didn't bring his laptop, and he has cut officially 2 hours off of his workday each day.
I love that. Incredible. I love that. Well, I'm going to, my favorite session of my coaching, which now that you said it, I'll probably put it in there. I wasn't necessarily going to do it, but I did it before, just kind of on a whim. I added a section on email, and it was the most popular section I had. So it's email's always a good one. I tried to stay out of the black hole of email today. All right. So we're coming up on 45 minutes. I'm going to go us into wrap mode so that I can be on my Facebook Live in 2 minutes and let you guys all get to work. So my goal today was really to help you guys come up with a few ideas to declutter. And, I really feel like if you have somewhere that you can dump your ideas, I think you should have a paper place that you do immediate actions. And I think that you should have a long-term cabinet, is what David Allen would call it, where you store stuff. He might call that your someday maybe ideas. This is something I'm going to do at some point. And I think that would be a benefit. I think the second thing is make sure that you're doing a weekly action plan, and then break that down into daily action plans. If you show up and you've got a plan for the day, then you're less likely to have clutter in your brain trying to figure out what to do. And then last is, thanks to Deborah, is to set a buffer before if you need to make planning time, and a buffer after so that you can take action time whenever you've got an appointment. So if it's preparing for the client you're meeting with and you want to do a little Facebook research, then schedule that time. If it's some time like this where you're like, okay, I'm going to take action. I'm going to go get an Evernote account. I'm going to figure out, what ideas I can scrape together. take time and do that action. And then the bonus one was limit your multitasking. So let's, what are your final thoughts, Deborah?
Well, my biggest takeaways, even on this call, what I didn't anticipate in my schedule, because I have a coaching call literally right after this with Bill Hillstead.
Oh,
and
nice.
I'm not great at scheduling the after time. I've gotten better at scheduling the before time, but you just reminded me it's even, what am I going to take action on, like the Evernote thing, and setting it up and making that time slot. Otherwise, I end up allowing that to carry me into the evening and working late. I'm most creative at night, ironically.
Yeah. Well, that's great though. I mean, I think there's
My logical brain is more during the day, but my creative and content.
You're part of the 20%. In fact, that guy who did that interview that I sent you guys the link to, he said he's more creative at night, I think. So I think that's awesome. Well, as always, you make these calls brighter and better. I'm grateful for you, Deborah, and I'm grateful for the rest of you and your kind words for being here. We will be back next Monday at noon Pacific time. And stay tuned. In theory, on the weekend, I'll post what is going to be in the Win by Noon user mastermind group, or it could be like today where I post it the morning of. Look forward to seeing you. Appreciate you all. If you like this, give it a like. I'm supposed to say that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching it there, and appreciate you. Now go take some action.
We're going to go like your live.
Let's do it.